What unfolds when a royal agrees to one of America's most respected interviews, only to leave in anger? Prince Harry's long-awaited 60-minute sit-down with Anderson Cooper started with calm and courtesy. Yet, as the questions grew sharper, the atmosphere shifted. This was more than an interview. It became a slow clash between a seasoned journalist and a defiant royal, ending in one of television's most memorable walkouts. The setting was quiet, understated, and familiar to the program style. No stage lights, no audience, just 2 chairs, a table, and the stillness of serious conversation. Anderson welcomed Harry with a handshake and a respectful smile. "Harry, thank you for joining us," Anderson began, his voice carrying both warmth and weight. Harry gave a brief nod, sitting at ease but with a hint of unease beneath the surface. "Well, I suppose people expect me to speak for myself, so here I am." Anderson responded with a light chuckle, steadying the moment. "That's the value of talks like these. Viewers hear directly from you." The opening flowed smoothly. Anderson asked about Harry's new life in the U.S., his projects, the shift from royal duty to private work, and raising a family away from the monarchy. Yet Harry's replies carried a sharper tone than expected. "America has been manageable," he remarked, but with a touch of pride. "Hey, I don't have to follow empty rituals or pretend my family understands me. It's freeing to live where people see me as an individual, not just a spare part of an institution." Anderson adjusted slightly, unfazed. Having questioned presidents and world leaders, he knew how to navigate pride and tension. Leaning forward, he asked, "But isn't there comfort in tradition? A kind of stability?" Harry gave a quick smile. "Comfort for whom? For those sitting on gilded thrones. Tradition is nothing more than a cage with polished walls. My family clings to it because it conceals the fractures." The energy in the room shifted. Anderson noticed a flash of defiance in Harry's eyes, but kept his tone steady. "That's a striking perspective. Still, many admire the monarchy as a symbol of unity and endurance. What would you say to them?" Harry answered without hesitation. "They're in love with a storybook image. They don't see the machinery behind it, the control, the silence, the manipulation. They cheer for the crown without caring who suffers under its weight." Anderson paused, letting the words settle. His instincts told him the tension was rising, but his task was to let the truth surface, however uncomfortable. He redirected gently. "Let's talk about family," he said with care. "You've spoken about Meghan and your children with real emotion before. How is life as a husband and father, separate from the institution?" Harry's jaw tightened, though he wore a faint smile. "Life as a husband and father is exactly as it should be, mine. And frankly, neither the press nor the monarchy has any right to dissect it. I protect what's mine. That's more than they ever did for me." Anderson nodded but pressed on. "Yet when you speak publicly, through interviews, documentaries, or your book, you invite questions. Isn't there a contradiction between asking for privacy while also sharing personal details on your terms?" Harry's eyes flickered with irritation. "That's a worn-out argument. Privacy isn't silence, it's control. I choose what the world deserves to know, not the other way around. If people can't grasp that, they're not worth addressing." The change in tone was clear. What began as an engaging conversation was now edging toward confrontation. Anderson stayed composed, even with a slight smile. "That's certainly one interpretation. Some might call it selective." Harry leaned back, arms folded. "Selective? No, it's called freedom. Something you, as an American, should understand better than most." The words carried the weight of a challenge. The warmth of the opening had dissolved, replaced by an icy tension that made even the smallest creaks on set feel loud. Anderson nodded slowly, jotting notes with a neutral expression. Inside, he recognized the volatility. This was no ordinary interview. The room's stillness was deceptive. Cameras rolled silently, crew members barely moved, and in the center sat 2 men, one practiced in probing questions, the other simmering with resistance. The tension was now visible. Like heat rising off asphalt, Anderson leaned forward, his tone measured but sharper, designed to pierce Harry's guard. "You've spoken often about struggles with the institution," he began. "But I want to ask something deeper. Your mother, Princess Diana, became a global figure not only because of her role, but because of how she connected with people. Do you feel you carry her legacy?" Harry's lips pressed into a thin line. The question struck a nerve, and his response was quick, clipped. Legacy is a word the media clings to. You raised my mother up, then tore her down, and now expect me to wear that as though it's a crown I should be grateful for. I am not her replacement, and I won't let anyone use a memory to measure me. Anderson nodded slowly, holding his composure. Fair point. But many see you continuing her spirit of independence, of challenging tradition. Isn't that something you identify with? Harry scoffed, arms still crossed. You want to turn me into a symbol because it makes for better headlines. I'm not here to be a candle in the wind for anyone's nostalgia. My mother's memory belongs to me and my family, not to the public, and not to journalists eager to craft a narrative. The words were sharp, nearly accusatory. Anderson absorbed them without a flicker, his years of experience keeping him steady. "All right," he said softly. "Let's shift. Megan, you and she have both spoken openly about the challenges you faced. Some critics argue your marriage pulled you further from your family. How do you respond?" Harry's eyes flashed again. "Critics? You mean people who've never met her, who sit behind desk writing columns as if they know us?" Megan didn't pull me away. She freed me from a suffocating institution. Anyone who can't see that is blind. Anderson's voice stayed calm, though Harry's hostility was plain. "But when you say she saved you, doesn't that suggest that without her, you'd still be trapped? Doesn't that give her almost singular influence over your choices?" Harry smirked, shaking his head. "Singular power? No. It's called partnership. Something most journalists can't grasp because they are too busy dissecting other people's relationships instead of living their own." The remark cut sharply, but Anderson kept his professional mask intact, refusing to react. He jotted down a note and smoothly redirected. "You've also been open about raising your children in America. How does fatherhood here differ from what it might have been in the UK?" Harry exhaled sharply, almost dismissive. "It's simple. Hey, my children get to be ordinary. They are not stage props for photographers or pawns in a royal chess match. Unlike back home, they have a father who protects them." Anderson tilted his head. "So you don't believe your family would have protected them?" Harry's tone turned nearly mocking. "Protected them? The monarchy doesn't even shield its heirs, let alone the so-called spare's children. My kids would have been sacrifices to tradition. That's not family, that's exploitation." Anderson sighed lightly, patience tested but still intact. "Some might argue that through documentaries, books, and interviews like this, you've also placed them in the spotlight, just on your own terms. How do you reconcile that?" Harry leaned forward, his voice harder now. "There's nothing to reconcile. I decide what's best for my family, not the media, not the crown, and certainly not people like you." The air chilled. Anderson's jaw flexed, though his tone stayed calm. "It seems whenever accountability is raised, Harry, you redirect back to control. Do you think there's space for balance?" Harry's smirk widened, almost smug. "Balance is a myth. Either you control your story or it controls you. I refuse to be a victim of narrative again. That's something you'll never understand. Your entire career relies on prodding at other people's lives." For the first time, Anderson's brow tightened, the faintest sign of irritation beneath his steady demeanor. He let the silence linger, watching Harry sit in it. At last, he spoke, his voice deliberate. "Let's look ahead. What do you see for yourself in the future? 10 years from now, what does life look like for Prince Harry?" Harry gave a short laugh, but it carried condescension. "The future? The future is mine, not a press release. I'll do what I want when I want, and people can either accept it or choke on their expectations." Anderson tapped his pen against the pad, slowly, twice. His outward calm remained, but the weight behind his eyes showed the strain. He leaned back slightly. "Interesting," he murmured almost to himself, then looked directly at Harry. "You know, Harry, I've interviewed people at their peaks and at their lowest. Presidents under scandal, soldiers returning from war, families broken by tragedy. They all had one thing in common: humility. Do you think there's a risk you've lost some of that along the way?" Harry stiffened, his smirk giving way to a scowl. "Humility? Don't lecture me. I've endured things you couldn't imagine. If I seem unapologetic, it's because I've earned the right. Humility is for those still seeking approval. I don't need anyone's." The words landed heavily, thickening the silence until it felt oppressive. Anderson nodded slowly, his voice calm but edged with steel. "That's one perspective." The cameras kept rolling, but the crew could feel the same thing the audience later would. that the interview was teetering on collapse. The quiet of the set had grown weighty, suffocating. Even the most seasoned staff sensed the cracks widening between the two men. Anderson adjusted slightly, his pen resting motionless. His voice stayed steady, though weariness edged in. "Harry," he said carefully, "you've spoken about control and forging your own path. Yet critics point out that your appearances, your book, the Netflix series, interviews like this, all still center on the monarchy. How do you respond to those who say you claim to leave the institution, yet never let it go?" Harry let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Critics, always critics. They cling to illusions, desperate to polish the crown. Let me be clear. I speak about it because it shaped me, because it scarred me. The monarchy isn't something you just walk away from. It's stamped into you. If I expose its flaws, that's my right. If people can't handle that truth, it's their problem." Anderson raised an eyebrow, his expression calm. "But you've also profited from those flaws. Do you see the contradiction?" Harry leaned in, eyes narrowed. "Profited? Tell me, Anderson, is it profit when you reclaim pieces of your life stolen from you, or is it survival? I took back my story. If people pay to hear it, so be it. Better they hear it from me than from the tabloids you love to quote." The dismissive tone cut deep, testing even Anderson's legendary patience. He kept his voice level, but tighter now. "I don't quote tabloids. I ask the questions the public wants answered. There's a difference," Harry smirked. "Semantics. At the end of the day, you're still digging, still feeding the public's appetite for drama. You're no different from the rest of them." The insult lingered, and this time Anderson didn't smile it away. His eyes flickered with something sharper, though his voice stayed calm. "You've criticized the press often. Yet here you are again, sitting in front of cameras. Isn't it fair to say you want the attention? Just on your own terms." Harry's lips curved into a mocking half-smile. "Ah, the old trap. Attention, fame, celebrity. Do you people ever tire of repeating the same story? I'm not here because I seek your attention. I'm here because you asked for mine. Let's not pretend otherwise." The arrogance in his tone rippled through the room. The producer shifted in discomfort, and even the hum of the lights felt louder. Anderson sat still, absorbing the jab, outwardly calm though his composure showed cracks. "All right," Anderson said softly. "Let's change focus. You've often spoken of your mother. She fought for independence, for her own voice, sometimes against the very institution you criticize. Do you believe she would be proud of how you've handled things?" Harry's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with both anger and pain. "Don't you dare sit there and use my mother as a prop for your broadcast. You didn't know her. You didn't know what she endured. You have no right to speculate about what she would think." Anderson let the words settle, expression unchanged though patience was running thin. "I wasn't speculating. I was asking for your perspective. There's a difference." Harry leaned back, his voice rising slightly, arrogance thick in every word. "Perspective? My perspective doesn't need your validation, or anyone else's. If you think you can corner me into a sentimental soundbite, you're wasting your time." Anderson's pen tapped once, then fell silent. He exhaled slowly, steadying himself. "Very well. Let's talk about Meghan. Many admire her, others criticize her. How has her role shaped the man you are today?" Harry laughed, but it carried only disdain. "Here we go. Always Meghan, always the obsession. Let me be clear. She isn't my role model. She's my partner. If people can't accept that, they are stuck in the past. Like you. Why not ask about my work, my projects, instead of circling the same speculation?" Anderson's smile was thin, his professionalism strained. "I have asked about your work. You've redirected nearly every answer back to grievances with your family or the press. Could it be that your critics have a point? That your story is now defined more by resentment than purpose?" Harry's face hardened, his tone dropping to a low growl. "Critics. Always critics. I don't owe anyone purpose. I don't owe you a neat narrative. I live for myself, not for approval." The arrogance hung heavy, suffocating. Anderson leaned in, his voice calm but sharpened with steel. "And yet, you sit here on one of America's most watched programs, demanding to be heard. That, Harry, is a contradiction worth noting." Harry's reply was venomous. "Spare me the lecture, Anderson. You thrive on contradictions. Without people like me, you'd have nothing to fill your precious airtime. Remember that before you tried to moralize. The silence that followed was nearly unbearable. Crew members shifted uneasily, exchanging glances. Anderson's calm exterior hadn't fully broken, but the weight of Harry's arrogance pressed heavily over the set. Finally, Anderson straightened, his tone deliberate and low. I've interviewed leaders, survivors, people who faced unimaginable loss. They all carried themselves with dignity. What I'm seeing here, Harry, is something else entirely. Harry's eyes narrowed, his smirk returning. Dignity is overrated. Survival is what matters. And I've survived more than you'll ever understand. The words landed with force but no respect. The room was now charged with hostility, the breaking point only a breath away. Everyone could feel it. The fuse was nearly gone. Anderson sat back, composure thinning but intact. The next question, the next exchange, would decide everything. The studio's silence pulsed with tension. Anderson Cooper cleared his throat, voice steady, eyes sharp. Harry, let's step back. For nearly an hour we've discussed your family, your choices, your life in America. You've spoken often of control, of refusing to be defined by others. But I have to ask plainly, don't you think this defensiveness, this hostility, defines you more than anything your family or the press ever could? Harry smirked, tilting his head. Defensiveness? Hostility? I call it honesty. Something your industry is allergic to. The problem isn't me. It's people like you who want me in a fairy tale. Newsflash. I don't fit in the box, and I never will. Anderson's pen tapped once against his notepad. He leaned in, his voice edged with steel. This isn't about fairy tales. Harry, this is about accountability. Each time I ask about your family, you lash out. When I ask about your wife, you scoff. When I ask about your future, you dismiss it. At what point do you stop blaming others and start looking in the mirror? Harry's expression hardened. He leaned forward, words sharp as steel. You sit there in judgment as if you know what it's like to be hunted every second of your life. You don't. None of you do. And yet you expect me to bow my head and answer politely. No more. That's over. I'm done playing by anyone's rules but my own. The air thickened. Every eye in the room was fixed on the two men. Anderson's patience, stretched to the limit, finally snapped. He set his pen down with care, locking eyes with Harry. Let me tell you something, Anderson said, voice low but cutting. I've interviewed presidents under fire, veterans shattered and rebuilt, survivors of unthinkable loss. Do you know what they all had in common? Humility, gratitude, a sense of responsibility. What I see here isn't courage, it's arrogance. You call it honesty. I call it entitlement. Harry blinked, momentarily thrown off balance, then scoffed. Entitlement? From you? You don't get to define me. You don't get to lecture me about humility. I've lived a life you couldn't survive for a single day. Anderson shook his head slowly. No, Harry, you've been given a life most people couldn't imagine. And instead of honoring that, instead of using it with grace, you sit here sneering at every question, treating every opportunity as an insult. That's not survival. That's self-destruction. The words landed harder than anything before. Harry's jaw locked, his face flushed. You think you can shame me? You think I owe you anything? I don't owe anyone explanations, least of all you. Anderson didn't flinch. Then why are you here? Why sit under these cameras if not to explain yourself? You rail against the media, yet you run to the spotlight. You talk about freedom, yet you're shackled to your own bitterness. You want to be heard, Harry, but you don't want to listen. And that, more than anything, is why you sit here alone, without the institution, without the family, without the respect you claim to deserve. Harry's fist tightened against the arms of his chair, his voice sharp and rising. You think you know me? You don't. You're just another vulture pretending to care. My family didn't deserve me. The monarchy didn't deserve me. And maybe the world doesn't either. But I'll still live my truth, whether you like it or not. Anderson leaned back, his expression hardening. The calm mask was gone. His voice was cold now. You want the truth? Here it is. You're not living your truth. You're hiding behind it. You're not the rebel you imagine. You're a man who had everything and chose to burn it down. Not out of purpose, but out of pride. And if Diana were here, I think she'd weep at what you become. The words cut through the studio like a blade. Harry froze, his arrogance faltering for the briefest instant, replaced by raw fury. He shoved back his chair, the scrape loud against the floor. That's it. He spat. I won't sit here and be insulted. This interview is over. Gasps rippled from the crew. A producer raised a hand, but Harry was already on his feet, storming toward the exit. His microphone yanked loose, the wire snapping as he tore it away. Anderson watched him leave. Then, turning back to the camera, his voice was steady, deliberate. Sometimes the hardest truth to hear is the one that cuts closest to the bone. Tonight you've seen a man unwilling to face his reflection. That is his choice. But our job is to ask and to listen, even when the answers come wrapped in anger. He exhaled, his gaze softening as he addressed the audience. I want to thank you, our viewers, for staying with us. We hope for honesty, for reflection. What we received tonight was something else entirely. But perhaps, in its own way, it revealed more than any answer could. The cameras lingered on Anderson's face, composed yet heavy with a moment, before fading to black. In living rooms across America, audiences sat in stunned silence. The prince who had come to tell his story had walked away instead, leaving not clarity, but controversy